Oh, did you see, before we get started, did you see Robert Whitaker's, like, logo? I guess he's going to have on his clothes and stuff.
I have not seen it, but I bet this is going to be real funny.
I got to show it to you.
You can't say relatively unknown UFC champion and logo in the same sentence and expect to get like real outstanding graphic design.
It looks like some shit I drew when I was 13 years old.
Oh,
like
man.
it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it is precisely the kind of shit I would draw when I was 13.
It's a nice compliment to past Connor there.
Yeah, here we go. That's the same guy who did the UFC 25-year anniversary logo probably did this.
Huh.
I mean, it's just kind of a mess, right?
There's a lot going on here.
Right.
A lot happening.
The letters are not really the same shape or uniform or even centered.
I like that there's some like shit happening in what looks like the cowl of the death head. That's like, why is that there? Is what's peeking out that has a kind of a crosshatched theme?
Yeah, is
in
it suggesting
Death's
an
face?
Australian flag or something? Maybe.
No.
Yeah, that's like a bunch of too many lines. I don't know. It's really bad, isn't it?
It's just why I have questions. I have a lot of questions.
It kind of makes me love him more. Hallo und willkommen auf Heavy Hands. Boy, I was ambitious. My German is already failing me. Das ist richtig. Diese Vorsetzung ist alles auf Deutsch. Wie geht's, Patrick?
Sehr gut. Sehr gut.
Ooh, Pat has a little Deutsch in his back pocket, too.
Just a little bit. Yeah, it's been a while. I can read it just fine, but God, the speaking it, have not been able to do that since about 2007.
I can pretend to read it very well. I'm adept.
I understood what I understood what you were saying, and then I was like, "Holy shit!" Okay. Thinking back, I was 22. I was really drunk. Okay, remember the words. I'm like, okay, no, sehr gut.
It's the key to understanding German is just to picture yourself when you were drunk.
Yeah, very.
Yeah. Like that one time I had a lot of beer. I was feeling pretty German.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like an interaction I had with a German like international student when I was in Ireland in like the fall of 2007, and I think that was the last time. That really was the last time I effectively spoke German. So thanks, Connor, for reminding me of my many failings as a linguist.
Bitte schön. And now let's move on to our subject for today's episode. UFC 224 is what's on the table. It's what's on the docket, and it's all right. You know, we were discussing this before the record began. It's okay. It's not great. It's not UFC 225, which is really, in my heart, all I'm looking forward to. Still like 4 weeks away. But there are some good things happening on 224, and we are going to try to highlight pretty much all of the most meaningful fights, which mostly means the main card. So a quick preview of what we'll be discussing on today's ep. The main event, women's bantamweight title fight between Amanda Nunes and Raquel Pennington. Yeah. Co-main event, a middleweight contest between Jacare Souza and Kelvin Gastelum. Some interesting things there. And
it's a pretty fucking bomb fight right there.
Yeah, and then we've got Mackenzie Dern making her second UFC appearance. She's taking on ABC, Amanda Bobby Cooper. John fucking Liniker is fighting Brian Kelleher in a bantamweight showcase that is pretty much guaranteed to be fun, although not guaranteed to last very long. And then, Vitor Belfort and Lyoto Machida are fighting. And so, let's start with the main event. Amanda Nunes, Raquel Pennington. Why does this not feel satisfying to me, Pat? Why does this not satiate my desires?
It's because it feels like one of the boxing sanctioning bodies decreeing a mandatory challenger.
Yeah.
That's basically it. It's like, okay, you're the champion, you've got to defend your belt. We don't have anybody for you, so here's somebody who's riding a little bit of a winning streak, and they're also riding an injury layoff, and their best win on that streak was a kind of a shot-looking Miesha Tate, and so here you go.
And really, that's an indictment of this division, because let's be honest, Raquel Pennington is the best choice in this division right now for a title challenger. There really is no one else.
Yeah, it's not like they've passed over some super deserving potential challenger here to make the grudge match between Amanda Nunes and Raquel Pennington. It's just, this is what this division looks like. It's not ideal. I mean, you could throw in Holly Holm coming off a couple losses in there. You could do that if you wanted to. You could. That's literally it. I mean,
I was waiting for the second option. I was actually on the edge of my seat there, but there's nowhere else to go. And so here's what we get. We get Amanda Nunes. She just had an unsatisfying win over Valentina Shevchenko, but still the women's bantamweight champion. It's funny, Pat. I was thinking Nunes Shevchenko. We had like a fairly heated back and forth before that fight, and it was like the anti Blachowicz Manoa. Because that fight, like, it took me at least an hour before I stopped caring about our argument. I stopped caring about our Nunes-Shevchenko argument about 6 minutes into the contest. Because it was like Woodley Thompson, too. It was so very, it's like when you're with a movie, you're trying to create tension, but then you don't ever pay off, so then tension just turns into boredom.
Yeah, it's like The Walking Dead.
Burn. Yeah, just like that. So because we didn't really revisit it, because it was so damn uninteresting, I don't know if I said this after the fact, but one of the big questions going into that fight about Amanda Nunes was, can she be a different person? Can she not be the fighter she's been throughout her whole career, i.e. somebody who goes completely ham the moment she gets into range, and once she starts having success, cannot force herself to stop chasing that success. And so she would gas out, she would panic, she would get countered, whatever. She would get reckless. And she did answer that question. It wasn't really satisfying, but that was like an intelligent way for Amanda Nunes to approach that fight. There was some serious, solid logic behind her game plan. And it was at least good to see that Amanda Nunes has matured as some way in a fighter. Much like watching Rose rematching Joanna, it's like, okay, now I know she's capable of transcending the mold that I had in my head for her before.
Yeah. Thinking back to the argument that we had about Nunes Shevchenko 2 before it happened, like, I think we pointed to, as a potential outcome in that fight, it was just going to be a real it could turn into just a slow-paced kickboxing match.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things we disagreed about. I think, if memory serves, it's been a long time, but where I was just like, I think Nunes probably wins a slow-paced kickboxing match because she's just going to throw a little more. And and that's exactly how it turned out, as a real tight, not especially interesting kickboxing match. And you were right when you said that Nunes just needed to be a different person, and she showed that she could be kind of a different person. Mm-hmm. What she hasn't learned is how to stay calm while throwing volume. Like, that's not an easy thing to do. It's hard to let your hands go while remaining calm. Like, that's the story of Lando Venata's career there. It's, but I remember when I interviewed Greg Jackson about Lando Venata after that fight with Tony Ferguson, where Venata really started throwing it just a ton of shots in an effort to get Ferguson out of there, kind of got sucked into that pace. I will always remember this. Greg Jackson said, like, when you jump on somebody to try to finish them, the thing is not the work that you're doing. It's not the strikes that you're throwing. It's letting yourself kind of get out of control mentally. Mm-hmm. It's letting yourself throw everything into these shots and kind of overwork and overthrow. You should be able to up your pace while keeping your heart rate fairly down. Right. Like, it's going to go up as you're working, but like, you don't need to let yourself get out of control just because you're trying to throw shots. That's a very difficult thing to do, but there are fighters who can do it.
Yeah. Calmness is like at the heart of long-term success as a fighter. Even beyond just however it physiologically affects you when you start freaking out, where you do start tensing up and physically wasting more energy, is also just like a mental thing. Like, you can be completely and totally exhausted, but if you're calm, you can realize that if I take 30 to 45 seconds off, I'll be fine. I'll be back. And like, that's the difficulty. The thing with Nunes is we still haven't seen her strike that middle ground. We have seen her take her foot off the gas against Shevchenko, and we have seen her plenty of times just pedal to the metal until either she falls down or her opponent does. But we have not seen her, as you said, like, stay calm while throwing volume. We have not seen her also. This does make Pennington somewhat interesting. We have not seen her stay calm against a fighter who is willing to pressure and throw combinations at her, throw combinations back at her. And if Pennington can, essentially the angle for this fight, I think, is if Pennington's durable enough to survive early on and can do that while maintaining a pace, she can be a challenge for Nunes if it turns out that Nunes can't actually find that middle ground.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point right there. And I think it speaks the kind of fight we're going to get, I think, depends a lot on something that is unknowable, which is what did the sparring between Amanda Nunes and Raquel Pennington look like? Because they were regular training partners for years.
Right.
You know, like they were sparring partners. I'm sure they sparred a lot. Like, we have no idea how those sessions looked, and we have no idea what, I think the big question there, what Pennington made of Nunes's power. Did those sparring sessions teach her that she could take Nunes's power and didn't need to be afraid of it, and she could just go in there and do it? Because Pennington's super tough, super durable. We know this about her. Or did it teach her that she needs to be wary and she can't just wade in? That is kind of the central fundamental question here that's going to determine what kind of fight we get. Because I think Nunes is probably going to try to boxer puncher her and very mildly pressure, but not too hard, and then occasionally look for a takedown. But mostly she's going to look to keep her Pennington at the end of her jab and then load up on the occasional combination when she can.
Yeah.
It seems fairly straightforward. It seems like that's the kind of game Nunes wants to play. And structurally, there's nothing about Pennington's game, I don't think, that's going to make her do something else.
Yeah. Like once again, it really comes down to well, I mean, I want to give Rocky some credit. We'll talk about what she can do in a moment, but a lot of it seems to come down to how cool can Amanda Nunes stay, depending on what kind of game plan she has to stick to. We're assuming, like, she's not really a pressure fighter. She's aggressive, but I think she is definitely actively learning to tone that down. That strikes me as something she has been trying to conquer for the last couple of years, and just had a major step with that Shevchenko rematch. So we're probably looking at, like boxing from the outside, and Pennington is happy to take the front foot if you'll let her. She is very happy to stalk forward and pressure behind that jab, especially in the Miesha Tate fight. It's a shame that was like 16 months and one awful injury ago, because Miesha Tate was very flat, but it was Rocky's best performance in the UFC. She put her hands together better than ever before. She was really sturdy and obnoxious in the clinch, and stayed very, very calm. It felt like a fight where she doesn't push a crazy pace, but it always feels like she could maintain that pace forever. She never seems even close to tiring out, no matter how many shots she throws. So, yeah, okay, let's talk about Raquel Pennington then. In my mind, that's what she needs to do to beat Amanda Nunes, is she needs to pressure her. I think she needs to, like, certain kind of sets of moves that Rocky's pretty good at. She's pretty good at poking with the jab, and she always anticipates a response, which is not super common in this division, where like women are expecting to get hit back after they hit their opponent. She'll use that jab to draw a response and then counter. The combinations she counters with are getting better and better. And so is her, like, advancing footwork. She's doing a much better job of keeping her feet under her while she continues to throw. And much like Karolina Kowalkiewicz, it seems to give her more power as well. Not just that she's more mobile and is able to put her punches together more freely, but she does seem to have a little more snap than she used to earlier in her MMA career.
Yeah, not a ton of snap.
No.
I mean, she's not a big puncher, but she's got some pop there.
She's just not much of an athlete in the way we usually think of it.
Yeah, that's going to be the crux of this fight, frankly. And it's something, when we talk about Nunes's last few fights, like, Shevchenko is extraordinarily fast, especially for a bantamweight.
Yeah.
Ronda Rousey, whatever else you might say about her, pretty good athlete, pretty fast.
Yeah.
Pretty explosive. Miesha Tate, very much not. But really, Nunes has fought all of the really good athletes in this division and has been faster than them. Pennington was markedly faster than Miesha Tate, but that's not a high bar.
And it was, again, like Miesha Tate, her worst performance. It sucks that Rocky's best performance had to come against the worst Miesha Tate, but that was a Miesha Tate who was even significantly flatter than she was in the loss to Nunes. She just did not look like she wanted to be there.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like, not to totally change the subject from Pennington, but it really looked like all of those really tough fights that Tate had over her career, like, kind of caught up to her in her last.
It did, right? Like, it started to get a little scrappy, and she was like, "This again." You know, yeah, she just didn't want it. Didn't want to feel those punches. Didn't want to exchange. Didn't want to fight.
Couldn't take the punches that she used to.
Yeah,
you know, like she just could not take shots the way that she used to. So, which goes to show, I hope Tate stays retired, because, like, she seems to be one of the few fighters who made the decision to walk away at the right moment in her career, kind of based on how things were going and the future she saw ahead of her. So, you know, shouts to her. I hope she seems to be working kind of like an Instagram fitness personality type of gig. So good for her. I hope it works out.
Yeah,
props.
Sure. Whatever. Yeah. And she's, you know, she's dating that Johnny Nunes guy. It's all coming up. It's all coming up roses for Miesha Tate.
She's pregnant. She's about to have a baby. Good for her.
Brian Caraway listens to this show, Pat.
Thanks. Yeesh. Yeah, it's rough. It's a rough spot. Okay, but Rocky Pennington. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to like about her as a fighter. You like, I think you pointed out her counterpunching, which you're right, looked real sharp against Tate, even though, again, you know, she had a lot of time to pick and choose her shots there.
Yeah.
And she could really see those shots coming. You know, but she looked pretty good as a counterpuncher against Elizabeth Phillips, such as that was. She looked pretty good as a counterpuncher against Kelleher in a fight that was now more than 2 years ago. Like, there's a lot to like about Pennington's game. Just kind of the problem is it going to work against probably the best pure athlete currently fighting at 135 pounds? And the answer seems like it's probably going to be no.
Yeah, and one of the best technical strikers in the division as well. Yeah, it's yeah. The one thing I was thinking about, maybe you can give me some insight on this. How is Nunes in the clinch? She's all right, but is there a chance here that Pennington can base a game plan around forcing Nunes to clinch against the fence? Because that is a position she's quite effective in.
I think Nunes is the way I would describe Nunes there, and tell me what you think about this, Connor, is wildly inconsistent. There's some fights where she looks really good there, where she's digging for her underhooks and she looks real strong when she gets a collar tie, and where her takedowns in the clinch look pretty sharp. And then there are other times when she is so entirely lackadaisical about actually digging for kind of a dominant position in the clinch that she just gets kneed by a 5'5" Valentina Shevchenko repeatedly.
I don't know, like, how focused of a fighter Amanda Nunes is. It's difficult to tell. Like, there are definitely spaces where she's not playing the game as seriously as her opponent at all times. It's the lack of a middle ground for Amanda Nunes, that it's like all focus. It's you're just completely bearing down on the one thing you're paying attention to at the moment, or, you know, like against Shevchenko, she couldn't really, like, find ways around Shevchenko's defense. She could touch her legs up with low kicks, but she didn't come up with any different answers over 25 minutes.
There's a good way to square this circle here, which is to just say that, like, for all of Nunes's many gifts, she is not an adjustment type of fighter,
right,
or even really, I don't think, a game plan type of fighter, which I think it goes to show how excellent the coaches at American Top Team are, that they've managed to get her to become more of those things. But that's not her strength. It's not what she's good at. And not every fighter is going to be somebody who's, like, playing 12-dimensional chess in the middle of a fucking fist fight. Right. You know, like, that's not, like, that is asking too much of people. Even people, there are really intelligent people who do not fight that way. You know, like Jim Miller, pretty smart guy, not really a dude who's going to make a bajillion adjustments mid-fight. Yep. Joe Lozon, pretty smart guy, not somebody who's going to make a lot of adjustments in the middle of the fight, or really even fight to, like, a tremendous game plan. Like, the ability to do that is an exceptionally rare gift, not necessarily one that's correlated with other intellectual gifts, or any other kind of, like, fighting related gift. And I just don't think it's not a knock on Nunes to say that she doesn't really have that. And so, but I don't think she's going to need it against Pennington, I think, is the upshot. Like, maybe Pennington is going to have some success if she manages to get it into the clinch and hold Nunes there, but she's probably not going to take her down. She's probably not going to hold her down. The best she can do is hope to wear her out, and she could, but that seems less likely to me than Nunes's physical edge kind of coming into play, and her figuring out, okay, this is really about me needing to dig an underhook. I can dig an underhook, and once I have an underhook, then my like substantial strength and size advantage is going to come into play.
Yeah, I tend to agree pretty much across the board. Like following your logic, I'll say Pennington's shot here, her chance here, is to force Nunes into the kind of fight where she would need to make an adjustment. I think that's probably when you get Nunes to start losing focus and start acting recklessly, and maybe you draw that back out of her. But she'll need consistent pressure. She will need to consistently force that clinch. She will need to counter Nunes effectively. And she'll need to do that against a Nunes who is probably going to be using her reach, staying on the outside, and using her much quicker feet to just refuse Pennington the chance to tie up, all while lining her up for big right hands, heavy low kicks, so on and so forth. So it just feels like Nunes just has too many options. And again, like Rocky is, I like Raquel Pennington a lot. She seems really cool. I enjoy her fights. But again, she feels like a default challenger.
For Pennington to win this fight, I think she needs to basically fight a perfect fight where she needs to somehow land lots of shots without eating a lot of shots and then immediately pushing into the clinch, right? But it's not like she can just stick Nunes on the outside because Nunes is longer and quicker than her. So if Pennington wants to fight at jabbing distance with her, well, Nunes has probably a better jab than Pennington does, and a longer jab and a heavier jab and quicker hands.
Raquel might throw hers more, but she'll need to be cutting off the cage. She'll need to be constantly trying to stay in front of Nunes, which is a dangerous place to be anyway. It's like,
Well, she needs to land combinations without getting countered heavy. So that means that she would need to play this incredible like tightrope distance walk where she's kind of right on the fringes of the pocket, but close enough to step into the clinch and smother Nunes whenever Nunes lets two shots go. So is that possible? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Pennington's going to get hit a lot if that's the game she chooses to try to play. And if she gets hit a lot, what's that going to look like? That's going to take a pretty big toll.
It could work if she's even more durable than we think, which she could be, but she could also be less durable than we think. Because let's be real, the hardest puncher she's faced was Jessica Andrade. And she survived some big shots, but Andrade had 0 knockouts at women's bantamweight since her first 4 fights as a pro, I think. She was not like that respectable of a puncher at women's bantamweight, just there aren't any punchers, and Nunes is the best one in the division. So we'll see. If it turns out Pennington can take those shots and still like stay calm and counter in combos after she gets hit, that could be a very interesting fight too. But again, it's going to be a kind of fight where she has to get hit.
Yeah. So. I think you're absolutely right. The thing that fascinates me about that is that, like, if you can, I think what pulls Nunes out of her game is you hitting her back, right? And hitting her back a lot. So if Pennington can do that, then she could very easily end up making Nunes look silly by rounds 4 and rounds 5 when Pennington still has a full gas tank and Nunes has like shot her wad in like halfway through the second round trying to win a firefight with somebody who's just eating her shots.
Yeah, like it's about making her have to adjust, because I agree with what you said. I don't think she's good at it. And that takes a toll when you realize you have to do something you can't do that well and never have done that well.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm picking Nunes fairly comfortably. I think probably inside the distance. So,
yeah, that sounds about right. Nunes, let's see. Second round, ground and pound TKO. Maybe a knockdown, maybe a takedown opportunistically. Finish up on the ground where she's really dangerous.
I like Nunes third round rear naked choke.
Okay, I like that too. All right, well, we're sorry, Rocky. And if you win, we will definitely be back next week to celebrate the upset. But before then, let's move on to the co-main event. In segment number 2, we're going to talk about Jacare and Kelvin Gastelum in a quite interesting, I think, middleweight showcase. On to that after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. And welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are now talking about Jacare and Kelvin Gastelum, a middleweight who kind of looks like a light heavyweight versus a middleweight who arguably should still be a welterweight. What do you make of this matchup, my friend?
I think it's really interesting. I like the middleweight Gastelum a lot. I tend to think this is kind of one of the worst matchups for him in this division, except he's also a very heavy puncher, and Jacare doesn't take a great punch. So, which makes it really interesting. Like, Jacare's paths to victory here are very clear. Counter when Gastelum throws, and then shoot takedowns on a guy whose takedown defense is not that good. Get to a dominant position when he tries to scramble and finish with a submission. It's very, like, there's nothing complicated about what Jacare needs to do here. And conversely, for Gastelum, it's like, keep your distance, jab, and try to avoid the takedowns before they happen. Because the second that guy locks up with you, he is going to ragdoll you, right? So it's a pretty simple matchup in that, but how it could play out, the various iterations are really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I think you're right. If this like Jacare's chin potentially being kind of wasted at this point is a significant X factor. That really, to me, kind of feels like the door that really lets Gastelum into this matchup. Because if this was a Jacare of 4 years ago, the Jacare who fought Luke Rockhold fighting here, I think it would be a nightmare for Gastelum. All the problems he had with Chris Weidman, he would have, and then some, with an even more aggressive and even more assertive submission grappler with like an equally respectable takedown game. So yeah, that would be bad. Plus Jacare's size, plus, power and decent boxing. I think it's still going to be pretty difficult for Gastelum to find his way into this fight, because I think Jacare is going to get to pressure him. And I think that is significant. I want to talk about middleweight Gastelum, Pat, and like where he's headed and what he looks like, and is he even developing or changing at all as a fighter? That's what I want to talk about, really, because I want to revisit the Chris Weidman fight, because rewatching it kind of felt like it was a bad look for Gastelum. Like, it was a rough style matchup, and Gastelum definitely still had his moments. But what was Gastelum's plan in that fight? Like, watching it back, it was difficult to suss out, like, what is he trying to do? By round 3, it was pretty clear, because Cordero in the corner was screaming at him to pressure, to force Weidman to back up, which to me seems like a pretty obvious tack, because that is the one thing everybody has success doing against Chris Weidman. He likes to pressure, and he doesn't like to be pressured. But Gastelum didn't do it, and he did very little in the spaces between, like, the telling moments of that fight. He wasn't really getting a lot done actively.
Yeah, it was shocking how few strikes he landed in that fight that were outside that one huge flurry where he knocked Weidman down.
Right.
He barely landed anything.
He hardly threw anything. I mean,
yeah, he really had trouble pulling the trigger. He looked better in that Bisping fight, a lot better. I don't know if he was just terrified of the takedown when he felt how much bigger and stronger Weidman was, and he's like, if I pressure this guy, I'm going to be putting myself in range for him to grab me.
Yeah.
I think he was drastically thrown off by the size, in a way that he wasn't when he fought Bisping, maybe because he knew, like, okay, this is what it feels like to be in there with a guy who's 6'2" and long.
Yeah, but very much in the way that he was when he fought Neil Magny.
Yeah, like really thrown off by it. And like, it's easy for us to say, well, you got to adjust to it, but like, we're talking about 5 or 6 inches in height. Like, that is ridiculous. That is a huge difference in height and reach.
It's difficult, but here's the thing: is if Gastelum is going to succeed in this division, if this is his new home, he's got to be more like Robert Whittaker. Like, Robert Whittaker is the perfect welterweight to middleweight transition story. He has all the attributes that make him effective as a small middleweight, like the speed, more than anything speed, but things like agility and flexibility of movement due to being a smaller guy. even though, he's now like 200 something pounds, but still he's smaller than guys like Jacare and Weidman. That is augmented by the fact that he has a very effective game for middleweight. It's not just his welterweight attributes that make him effective. He has changed as a fighter since coming to middleweight, and uses his tools very effectively. You will never find a fight in which Robert Whittaker should be jabbing and isn't. And Gastelum is like still welterweight Gastelum in a lot of ways.
Let me point to the biggest difference between the two of them. Yeah. It's their feet, right?
Yeah.
What are Whittaker's feet always doing? They're always moving. He's very light on his feet. He is very much kind of up on the balls, leaping in and out, getting in and out of range. Gastelum has always been very flat-footed.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the basic problem is he really relies on his explosiveness to get him in and out. He bounces, but he flat-footed bounces,
Yeah,
and
it's more of a rock back and forth. He's not like making himself mobile. He's kind of just shifting weight for a punch.
Mm-hmm. Which it's basically trying to set a rhythm. It's trying to set a kind of a weird rhythm, but it's not angular, right? It's very straight lines. Yes. Whereas Whittaker's is very kind of circular, a very circular type of motion. Gastelum is really comfortable moving very quickly in straight lines, and that has always been his game. It's what was shocking when he was fighting, really experienced welterweights and beating the shit out of them early in his career. Was guys did not get how quick he was.
Yeah.
How quick his hands were and how quick his feet were. It's what has allowed him to be successful at middleweight is how quick his hands and feet still are. But he doesn't have that kind of like, okay, there are other directions to move that are not straight in and out.
He needs to lean into those advantages. If you're going to be faster than your bigger opponents, what makes a fast guy effective? It's not, you know what I mean? Like examples from the Weidman fight. Yeah, bursting in straight lines and just trying to shock a guy. That's, without an exit plan, without a follow-up in mind, where you get out away from the counter and then you sting him again while his big, slow hands are trying to catch you. That is not an adapted way of fighting. And likewise, like there was a moment in the Weidman fight where Weidman tried to Kimura Gastelum. He muscled his way out of that shit. Impressive. Like Gastelum is a very strong guy. That much is clear, but it's like he's still welterweight Gastelum. That kind of shit is stuff that you can get by being athletic as a welterweight with those abilities. But it's like now he's in this weird middle space where he's just too small to be the like squat powerhouse he was at welterweight. Now he has to rely more on the speed and mobility, but he doesn't really seem comfortable doing it. Or maybe just not focused enough to change the way that he fights. Like he was not zeroed in on what he needed to do in that Weidman fight. The chips were down. It was an important fight. And kind of like in the Tyron Woodley fight, kind of like in the Neil Magny fight, he not a lot, but he very quietly and softly shit the bed.
There's also a coaching aspect to this, right? Yeah. I love Rafael Cordeiro. You love Rafael Cordeiro. We are Rafael Cordeiro guys.
Yeah.
I do not think Rafael Cordeiro is the right guy to be coaching a undersized middleweight who needs to get in and out of range. Like, I do not think that is the right coaching fit for what the division demands of Gastelum for him to be successful.
I think he could still be more of a Cordeiro fighter and find some success, though. Like, hand speed and a small stature can go a long way if you are constantly forcing but you have to pressure consistently at least. You have to, make it like a strategy, like a thing you're trying to do throughout the fight.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, if your fighter is not going to commit to pressuring, to fighting the way that you want him to, Gastelum can pressure, but he seems fairly clear to me like a boxer puncher who even leans a little bit toward being a counter puncher.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's, of course, could you be a Cordeiro fighter and make a pressure game work as an undersized middleweight? Absolutely. But you've got to commit to pressuring. And if you can't commit to pressuring, if all of that Cordeiro training and the hard sparring and the working on your brain until you turn into the meanest motherfucker in the world, if that can't get you to do that in the spot where you need to do it, then it's not the right fit. Mm-hmm. That's like, I honestly think Gastelum would be better off if he just went and did some work with Jason Perillo. And just work on your footwork.
That sounds like an amazing, yeah. I mean, Cordeiro and Gastelum felt like a match made in heaven, but it still seems like Something's not clicking. And I don't even know if it's that dynamic or if it's just that Gastelum is just going to be the same exact guy throughout his career, no matter what changes. He's just going to be Kelvin Gastelum.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and you can tell. Like my favorite Gastelum story, and one that really well sums him up, is when the first time Gastelum got put on a diet, like a real proper nutritionist's diet to try to get him some help in making weight. When it was like salmon and salad was what was on his list, so Gastelum went and got fish tacos with a bunch of like cream sauce because he thought, oh, same deal, you know, and.
I mean, I respect that choice a lot, but
dude, look, nobody is hating on fish tacos here. This is a fish taco friendly show.
Yes,
but that is not salmon and salad. Like those two things are not equivalent. So, like to some extent, I think it's fair to say we're both Gastelum fans, and we both think very highly of him and what he's capable of, but. He may just be a dude who never quite turns that corner or turns it later in his career because he needs time to mature and figure shit out.
Yeah.
Like it's not like he's that young at this point. I think he's 27, 28.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, Phil Mackenzie was saying it last week on the MMA Depressed Us or after we recorded. And he was just like, yeah, is Kelvin Gastelum ever going to change? And it kind of like flipped the switch in my head. I'm like, oh yeah. He's like the same dude who fought Rick Story way back when he first caught my attention. He's the same dude. And yeah, so that's kind of the challenge here against Jacare, where the X factor is obviously Jacare's chin, which has been tested in more ways than he would like in recent fights. And, he's getting on. He's like 38. He's not a young man anymore and is obviously having trouble fighting the way he used to fight, not just absorbing shots, but also maintaining a pace and pulling the trigger with frequency are things we see less of in recent Jacare fights. So in a lot of ways, Jacare physically and based on his skill set is a bad matchup for Gastelum. He's going to test that porous takedown defense. He's going to put pressure on Gastelum. Even if he's not throwing much, it feels like Gastelum's instincts will allow Jacare to put that pressure on, and that's going to lead to some takedowns where Jacare's size and strength become a factor. What's Gastelum's window into this fight?
I think jab.
Yeah.
Keep Jacare busy, keep him at distance, force Jacare to bite on things and waste energy throwing counters back.
Yeah.
And then counter the counter, right? So I think if you're Gastelum, what you want to do, you want to be the one who's pressuring Jacare, and Jacare might let him at this point. I don't know if Jacare has the energy to really walk Gastelum down. So you push him back with the jab. Lace him with 1-2s, and then when Jacare tries to throw that counter right hand, roll under it, pull back from it, and then immediately let go with your left, right? Just like it's a tactical solution to the fight. I think very simply and straightforwardly for Gastelum is Jacare is going to throw that counter right hook. When he throws the counter right hook, you fucking hit him with 3 or 4 shots.
Yeah.
Like every time.
You just it's like one tactic that would work. Absolutely. You just have to be proactive in your counterpunching. You have to draw out the shot and then fucking ding him when he lets it go. Like something that was being said by Dominic Cruz a lot during the that Weidman fight. Dominic was like, Gastelum is not wasting any energy and he's staying calm and Weidman might wear himself out. But like it became clear as that fight wore on that Weidman wears out largely because people wear him out. This isn't heavyweight. Like you can't just wait for the other guy to get tired at middleweight. You can, but at the highest level, that is not really a reliable strategy in the way it is at 265. But it might be effective for Jacare because Jacare really looks like a fighter who probably cannot fight more than like 7 or 8 minutes at this point in his career, and even at a slow pace at that. So, like, it might be possible too. If Gastelum doesn't just ding him in the first round, he might be able to survive the first couple scrambles and then have his way with Jacare later on. Like, there are a lot of ways that Gastelum can win this fight, all of which sort of have the flavor of hit him with the left hand. But, I don't know. Becoming less interested in this matchup as we talk about it, Pat. Now I'm like, Oh, what does it matter? What does it all mean anyway?
Oh, this is, of all the fights on this card, this is the one I'm most interested in watching play out. I'm just not sure that much more analysis is going to get us anywhere, because it's like, how old is Jacare? Can Gastelum go to the second layer of the game plan to make this work and overcome his kind of inherent apathy? Like, those are interesting questions, but they're not questions that we're going to get any further on kind of arguing about them,
Pretty much.
Or talking about them.
They are questions, and they will remain that way until the fight happens. I will be interested to see, I want to see a different Kelvin Gastelum. That's the narrative for me in this fight. I want to see him try something a little novel, and I don't want to walk away from this feeling like, oh, he got lucky in exactly the way he was probably going to get lucky. But, we'll see. Jacare, big man, still dangerous, still terrifying. I still have nightmares every night about the way he stalked after Derek Brunson, like Jason, and then cut his head off after knocking him down. So he's a very intimidating man. And also, did you hear Jacare's doing hair regrowth treatments?
Seriously?
Yeah, this is his new thing. He said he wants to retire with a big afro. He misses his hair. So I hope we get to see Jacare show up in the octagon with a bizarre patchy afro that's really long in some places and really thin in others. I hope that's what we get out of this.
If Jacare finds the secret to male hair regrowth, I don't think that he needs to be fighting anymore, because he'll be rich in other ways.
Yeah, that's true.
So good for him.
Good for him.
Yeah.
That's that. That's the co-main event. It's happening, or it will. After this, we have a couple more fights in this card to talk about, basically running through the rest of the main card, maybe with a few tidbits on our favorite spots on the undercard, maybe. But we're looking at, again, Mackenzie Dern versus Amanda Cooper. We're looking at John Liniker versus Brian Kelleher, and Vitor Belfort versus Lyoto Machida after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about, we didn't really decide in an order, did we, Pat? We starting with Dern, or are we starting with the depressing one?
Let's start with Dern.
Okay. Mackenzie Dern, she's fighting Amanda Cooper. Second UFC fight. She had a hard battle in her first UFC bout. Didn't look entirely capable of pulling off all the moves she would need, which is, to be expected. She's a pretty inexperienced fighter. I don't think any of us should be crying Ronda Rousey just yet. But what do you make of Cooper as a second opponent for Mackenzie Dern? Is she going to offer her anything new that... oh, God, who was the last opponent?
Ashley Yoder.
That Ashley Yoder couldn't?
Yeah. Cooper is a pretty sharp striker. She throws... pretty nice jab, pretty nice 1-2, nice straight punches. She's got pretty decent footwork, and she's also tremendously flawed, right? Yeah. So this is everything you're looking for to test your up and coming, potentially big time prospect, is somebody who has skills to trouble her in one particular area, but also more than enough flaws where for you to have to fight through some adversity while still having an obvious path to victory. The obvious path to victory is the second this fight hits the floor, Cooper is in huge trouble.
Yeah, basically.
Actually, even the second this gets to the clinch, Cooper is probably in huge trouble, right? So just to reflect a little bit back on Dern's performance against Yoder, she had some trouble. She had some trouble with her. She had trouble at range, but she was surprisingly scrappy and surprisingly athletic. Yeah, those were the things that really occurred to me watching that fight.
The big takeaway for me was that she did not shy away from the fight getting rough. She kind of seemed to want it. She was in there throwing shots. It seemed clear she came in, if not intent, then at least willing to show off some striking, or at least put in some work as a striker, which she had done in her previous fight too, I believe, if I recall correctly. Mm-hmm. She spent a lot of it on the feet as almost by choice. and she didn't mind getting hit. Like her response to getting hit was to swing back. It wasn't very disciplined. It wasn't super technical, but she certainly looks like she has the mental makings of a fighter in that sense.
Yeah, she did not. You're absolutely right to say she did not shy away from it, and she understood how her striking was going to lead her to where she actually wanted to go, to the clinch, to shot takedowns, and eventually to the mat. Like she wasn't just striking for the sake of striking. She was striking in order to get herself to the places where she wanted to go. It was striking to serve her pressure. She wasn't like thrilled about getting hit, but she also wasn't shying away from it. She wasn't flinching when she ate those shots. Like, she was scrappy. She was there to fight. She understood exactly what she was trying to do, I think. And, like, with somebody who understands the fundamental way the pieces are supposed to fit together, it's like there are a lot of like kind of stumbling blocks to that point, past that point, but you're on the right track at least. Now, whether that continues now that Dern's left the MMA lab, I suppose that's another question. You can't like the longer I'm in this sport, the more highly I think of John Crouch. Like, I think he's really good, and I'm sad for Dern's sake to see him leaving there.
He's leaving the MMA lab?
To see her leaving there. She left the MMA lab. Sorry, I misspoke.
Oh, thank God. What if John Crouch leaves the MMA lab, then what will become of this sport? Okay, so I'm not actually up on this. Where's Dern going?
She's in LA. I don't know. I think she's sparring at Black House and then doing some private training.
Okay, so it could be a mixed bag. Could be Paige Van Zant going to Dan, whatever his name is, famed Muay Thai stylist in Portland, Oregon. Or it could be a fighter who knows she has some actual star potential, taking the initiative to put a decent camp together around herself. So, like, yeah, it's hard to say. At the very least, though, like, you can say this about Mackenzie Dern, even without John Crouch in the corner, you kind of have to assume she has the bare bones of the kind of fight she needs to fight to win here already in her back pocket. If she can stay relatively aggressive, keep some pressure on Amanda Cooper, and pursue takedowns after throwing her hands, then again, like, there's a step to get there. But one of Amanda Cooper's great flaws is her non-existent takedown defense and her extreme willingness to grapple with anyone who tries. So it does feel, in a puncher's chance kind of way, like you said, as soon as Mackenzie Dern gets a hold of Amanda Cooper, this becomes a different fight. The intriguing part to see how she's developing, if she's taken a step back, will be everything that does or doesn't lead her to that point.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I'm picking her, Mackenzie Dern.
Yeah, let's see. Which she is about a little over a 2-1 favorite. That sounds about right. Like, there are just too many ways for Cooper to lose this fight, even if she's winning it.
Yeah, Cooper has to land a perfect shot or has to snatch a perfect submission, which is even less likely than the former. Like, she's got to be. But yeah, I will say, in that fight with Angela Magana, I do remember Cooper looking a little sharper, like a little more professional than she had in previous bouts. A little more like she was learning to not pull the trigger at every opportunity. She was becoming more, Rose Namajunas and less, Beck Rawlings, where it's like every invitation to attack any target you will accept. She was a little more controlled and measured against Magana. So, like, if Amanda Cooper can continue improving, she does have a varied skill set and can do a lot of things quite well. So, yeah, it'll be intriguing. But if she's still more or less Amanda Cooper, Mackenzie Dern is probably going to take her to the ground at some point, and then it's Mackenzie Dern's fight. Well, let's move on. John Liniker, Brian Kelleher. Again, I want to talk about the depressing one first, but we've already consigned ourselves to talking about the deaths of both Vitor and Lyoto at the end of today's ep. So let's talk about John Liniker. Let's talk about Brian Kelleher. This one's going to be a damn scrap, I think, Pat. I mean,
what a great little piece of matchmaking this is.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a real shock saying that about a John Liniker fight, but Kelleher is down to do a lot of the things that Liniker likes to do.
Yeah, and in challenging ways too. He's not just going to stand there and let Liniker hit him, but he will fight at a quick enough pace that if Liniker is sharp, then he will be able to hit Kelleher and vice versa. So that's what makes it fun. Is it's not like they're just going to stand there and like wail on each other like Rock'em Sock'em Robots. They're both going to have to work to land their shots, but at a quick enough pace that there's going to be a lot of that happening.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, like as with a lot of fights, the big question here is who gets to come forward. Both of these guys like to do that. Kelleher is at his most effective when he's pressuring, and does Kelleher is one of those fighters who's very hot and cold, because he's like totally live and die by the sword. So you see some really impressive things, and you also see some really borderline humiliating defeats where everything just falls apart so quickly. But he shows off some surprising craft with his striking when he's got the opponent reacting to him, when he's corralling them into a corner, when he's pushing forward. He's a pretty good aggressive counterpuncher. He's got a weird selection of moves. Like, he might have one of the more dangerous spinning back fists in the organization right now. It's a move that he's actually legitimately good at landing with consistency. And likes to transition from that pressure boxing style into his wrestling as well. It's hard for me to imagine him getting to do those things against Liniker, because I can't recall the last time Liniker, like, let somebody back him up. You know?
Yeah, if you try to pull that on Liniker, he's just going to plant his feet and throw back at you. And so, like, where does that get you? That gets you into a slugging match with John. Either A, that gets you into a slugging match with John Liniker, or that gets you into, or that gets you to stop doing it. Those are your two options.
Yeah.
Right. What you can do is like play off of Lineker's hair trigger and then use that as a bridge into the other things that you want to do, whether that's takedowns or kind of moving around him, like trying to set the pocket and then move the pocket with your feet, allowing you to land more shots. But that still leaves you in a place where you are vulnerable to getting hit by John Liniker. I think Kelleher is going to be happy to play that game. I think he will be happy to kind of try to set the pocket and move it, let Liniker throw at him, and then either work from there into his wrestling or his takedowns. That's what TJ Dillashaw was able to do that in his fight with Liniker. I think Kelleher is going to have less success with it, but that makes for a fun fight.
Yeah. Kelleher is like, people probably don't give a damn about Brian Kelleher, but he deserves to be a fan favorite kind of fighter. He's the kind of fighter you should show up to watch, because he walks that razor's edge, man. He wants to go in there and get the finish. And despite having been upset by some surprising, out of nowhere finishes against him, he's not shy about engaging in that kind of 50-50 fight. So it's kind of hard to call. Like, if Kelleher can make his wrestling happen, Liniker has shown some spotty takedown defense in the past, and he has been stalled out on the ground. Kelleher is vulnerable to submissions on the mat, but he's actually he's not a great control grappler. So, like, that's the real issue here, is that Lineker's probably going to be able to get back up. So Kelleher's going to have to keep playing that dangerous guessing game in range over and over again until the fight's done. And every single time, Lineker's going to find some way to throw 6 punches back at his face. And yeah, Kelleher has some moves, but he's going to be there to get hit by it. I guess, like, is it worth talking about if John Lineker is nearing the end of his run yet?
Yeah, I don't think there's any particular reason to think that's the case.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
He's won. He beat Marlon Vera in his last fight in kind of a back. That Marlon Vera fight on rewatch looked to me like Liniker was figuring some things out for sustainability's sake. He's never going to not be a guy who's down to like get in there and mix it up. Like, that's who he is. But it looked to me like he was trying out, okay, I don't have to throw here. I can throw, but I don't have to in order to land this other thing.
Yeah. It looked to me like he was a little shook at the same time, though. Like,
you think so?
Yeah. He had his jaw broken by Dillashaw in the fight before. And the way that fight ended, I always get this impression whenever I rewatch it that, like, Vera was kind of coming forward and throwing at will for the last, like, 2 to 3 minutes of that fight. And Liniker was not letting him so much as he wasn't really comfortable. I don't know. It felt to me, splitting hairs, I guess, but he felt like he was uncomfortable doing what it would have taken to stop Vera from starting to pressure him, rather than he knew he didn't need to. But maybe that's just me underestimating the brain of the great John Liniker. Otherwise,
Yeah, I kind of think like at that point, Liniker more or less knew that he had it won. He was a little tired, and he kind of thought, eh,
yeah,
let's test out some footwork here.
could
Like
be.
he was still throwing, and whenever because what Vera figured out was that he could kind of move around Lineker, right? If as long as he didn't set his feet. The problem was Lineker figured out that he could move too,
Yeah.
and so Vera would try to cut these angles on him, and Lineker would wait until Vera's in the last couple of minutes of that fight I'm talking about. Lineker figured out that when Vera tried to cut those angles and come in on him, Lineker could step around him and then force him back to the fence and land two shots. And so yeah, you're right that Vera had some genuine success there, but I think that was I think that was kind of an adjustment for adjustment kind of thing from two guys who are actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I may be a Lineker apologist to some extent.
Well, and I may be a Lineker hater. I'm well known on the internet for being that kind of person. So, there's no concrete evidence, at least, to say that Lineker might be fading. We're looking at this essentially as both of these guys at their best, doing what they like to do. And from that perspective, even though it's going to be a very dangerous kind of fight for both guys, Lineker is just okay in those kinds of fights most of the time. And Kelleher has frequently not been. So even though he's got many good moves, when Lineker touches Kelleher's chin or cracks him to the ribs, you would assume it's going to have more of an effect than when, vice versa. So John Lineker feels like a safe pick.
Yeah, I'm going back and rewatching the Lineker Vera fight again as we're talking here. I thought Lineker looked fine. Like, it really strengthened my impression that he was just trying a bunch of shit out that he hadn't tried beforehand in the interest of kind of sustainability. And so when he looked tentative here or kind of not necessarily like himself, I really think it was because he was trying to get some time in.
Sure.
If that makes any sense.
I guess
I
automatically worry when a guy whose whole career has been defined by him not caring about taking damage suddenly starts to care about it.
Oh, I don't think it was about caring about damage so much as it was trying to think like, what if I don't have to get hit that much?
Sure.
Which is not quite the same thing as caring about damage. It's more like, there are other ways to do this.
Was it a reaction or was it an adjustment? Is I guess the question.
Yeah.
And I'm not settled on it yet, but if we're being optimistic, it was an adjustment, and Lineker will still be the same Lineker that we know and love and secretly loathe. So on to the middleweight fight that closes out this main card and will close out our show in bombastic fashion. If nothing tells you how quality this pay-per-view really is, it's this fight. Vitor Belfort, Lyoto Machida. They're both still alive, Pat, and they're going to fight.
Are they?
That's a good question, actually. What do you make of this matchup? Why is it happening, first of all? I mean, the thing is I can't really complain about it. It's a perfectly reasonable fight. And if Lyoto Machida is going to keep fighting someone, and if Vitor Belfort is going to keep fighting someone, they may as well do that against each other.
Yes. So there's a section in Vitor Belfort's wiki that says 2018 and beyond. And my reaction to that is not positive. I don't know. I feel real icky about watching both of these guys at this point. And, I think the fact that Machida was able to win a fight against a raw as hell Eric Anders in his last fight and Belfort was able to beat a totally shot Nate Marquardt last year. Like, I don't need to see this at this point. I've got more than enough in my fight spank bank for both of these guys that I don't need to see them do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I would phrase it quite that way, but
that's your prerogative, Connor. I chose to phrase it exactly how I did. So,
each his own.
Yeah, like we've seen both of these guys do tremendous violence over the years. We've seen both of them in incredible fights. Some of them very tactical, some of them real kind of bloody all-out wars. Like, I just don't need to see this anymore. And if there are people who do, more power to them, but I am not one of those folks.
Yeah. On a matchup perspective, one thing that does stand out to me is that I think Vitor I think he's always been a better athlete than Lyoto Machida. in terms of speed and explosiveness and power and all those things, and being able to make like quick decisions and respond at a moment's notice in the midst of an exchange. Belfort, I think, still has quite a bit of that. What he's lost is durability. But in many ways, he's like very similar to the guy he was throughout the later portion of his career, minus a lot of the TRT. But what can you do? Lyoto's style is, I think, still more reliant on that kind of thing than Vitor's ever has been. Vitor likes to counterpunch and all that, but he doesn't mind like powering through, just picking the right spot to throw one everything on it punch and power through with a big counter. Lyoto still, against Eric Anders, was fighting a kind of fight where it's like, man, you really got to be on the ball with these counter left hands. You have to step in at just the right time, especially if you're a guy like Machida, who has never had much in the way of head movement, who's, like it's all about setting up those counters for Lyoto Machida. And it's all about colliding with you as you're attacking. And it does feel on the surface like it's probably more dangerous for Lyoto at this point than it is for Vitor. Know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think Vitor probably wins this, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah. Because also, like, what if they just don't do anything? Which could definitely happen. That's what happens when you get old as a fighter. You don't like pulling the trigger. And I was the only person on the planet who enjoyed Vitor's fight with Nate Marquardt. And I don't really blame anyone else for not enjoying it. It was okay if you went into it expecting two old guys to not do much. I don't know. You picking Vitor?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I'm picking Vitor too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week. And
yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything more to add to that. I think it's just old guys.
That's all there is to say about it. Yeah, it would have been a good place to end the show there, but we do have a couple other things to cover before we actually sign out officially. First of all, Pat, your schedule for this week. What do you want the people listening to check out?
So I had the book club episode of Tides of History come out last week, talked about 5 of my favorite popular histories that y'all might enjoy reading. And then there's nothing new coming out this week, but then next week I will have an episode on Martin Luther and the early Protestant Reformation.
Nice. Well, that Fedor article I talked about last week is coming out this week, so keep your eyes out for that. But it is pretty good. Fedor Emelianenko, king of the transition. I do love talking about Fedor doing insanely impressive stuff in the midst of a crazy scramble or exchange. And he was really good at that, so keep your eyes out for that. Otherwise, I think that's about it. And, gosh, I'm just bummed out. Just really sad. I like Lyoto too much to see him go out like this. Oh, okay. All right, let's wrap things up. Let's not think about it anymore. Thank you all for tuning in. Look forward to the main event and the co-main event. Look forward to whatever else you want. If you're like me, skip the beginning of the main card and you'll probably be a happier man or woman, to the 3 of you out there listening. Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Heavy Hands. Find us on social media with your comments, questions, or concerns. You can find Pat at Patrick_Wyman on Twitter.com, and you can find me at the same address at Boxing Bush, B-U-S-C-H, and you can also find both of us on Facebook.com/either Patrick Wyman MMA or /Connor Rebush MMA. And rate us on iTunes. Give us a favorable review. That stuff does legitimately help, and we probably should mention it more on the show, but tell your friends about this show, and check us out on Patreon. Bonus episodes and much more can be found on there. $3 a month is not so much money to get 2 extra little episodes of Heavy Hands a month, and extras besides. So make sure you check us out over there. And until next time, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.